Well, what is of interest what is taking place at the state borders of Ukraine that you could share with us? Well, first of all, I would like to know that the situation on the border with the Republic of Belarus and Russia, bordering with Chernihiv and Sumy region, it is quite tense, but it is under control. If to talk about our border with Russia, the enemy, unfortunately, does not stop shelling, especially border areas, Chernihiv and Sumy Oblast. This is what is taking place on a daily basis. And we also notice that actually these are some settlements on the territory of Sumy, which comes under attack. That is why we know that artillery is being used, as well as other types of weapons, aviation strikes, and explosives, which are being dropped on the territory. And this is not the threat only to the Ukrainian troops, but also to civilians, because these attacks, they target civilian objects of infrastructure and some residential areas. Armed Forces of Ukraine, the National Guard of Ukraine, the Border Guard Services of Ukraine, they are doing their best to protect this direction, to fortify it. We have different engineering measures, we have checkpoints to monitor the situation in the area and close to the border. We do not register any units who would want to make an attempt at invading, but we have to be ready for the development of any situation. Then, if to talk about Belarus side and their units, they are protecting the site across the border. But in terms of the numbers and their actions, we do not see any changes. But the border with Russia, with Chernihiv and Sumy regions, also would like to stress that our border with Moldova, Transnistria area, border with Belarus, we pay enough attention and we take all the measures to strengthen our protection level and to prevent any exacerbation of the situation in this direction. Could you please tell us more about movements on the border with Belarus? If there are any actions taken by the enemy, is it more about blackmailing or is actually preparation for invading? What is the trend? I think that it is blackmailing to start with, but I also want to mention that the forces of Ukraine, well, the departments, the ministries, they cannot rule out, and they have never ruled out that the armed forces of the Republic of Belarus could join the war waged by Russia against us. And if there is any moment which is suitable for the enemy, there could be another attempt to invade. And I wanted to emphasize once again that we are trying our best to monitor the situation across the borderline and to strengthen the defense, close to these areas. And if there are any steps taken in this direction to invade Ukraine, we're also well aware of the fact that invasion of the armed forces of Ukraine also happened from the territory of Belarus. I also wanted to remind you that as of the 1st of September, there have been some changes introduced as far as border crossing is concerned. But I would like to go back to the fact that the school year has started on the 1st of September for Ukrainian children. So could you please give us some stats about the numbers of people who returned to the country over the past days? Well, as far as these changes are concerned, I wouldn't say that we have noticed any of them. Those changes, well, the decision of the government has not been published and has not entered into force. That is why I cannot say that we have any particular changes in terms of border crossing. Well, we know that we can talk about some categories, males, there are certain criteria which apply to them, and border guard officers, they abide by the legislation which regulates the border crossing of Ukraine, and we have been registering a certain influx when it comes to vehicle transport movement. We would have some 95,000 persons crossing the border and 21,000 of vehicles crossing the border. Then, if to talk about recent times, we say that there is some increase. We have more than 100,000 persons crossing the border in both directions, and we have some 23,000 of vehicles crossing the border. At the same time, when I talk about the passenger traffic, it is quite dynamic, both entering and exiting the country. Usually, before the weekend, we register that there are more people who are leaving the country, but this difference between people leaving and entering the country is not so drastic. Here we can talk about some 2,000-3,000 of persons. And we can actually say that there are more people entering the country, well, apart from weekends. So there are more people who are entering the country, and sometimes this difference can be greater, like 60,000 people per day. Those categories which are crossing the border, these are different people, women, children, the elderly, men who are allowed to cross the border and to leave the country. Here I'm talking directly about the citizens of Ukraine. And since the 10th of May, we have started registering, and it is a trend that there are more people entering the country. Here I'm talking about Ukrainian citizens rather than the people who are leaving. When we have mentioned those changes, what I meant is this e-business trip, which is available for some categories of men who can take a business trip. Here we talk about entrepreneurs. So do we actually have the service, and who can use this service? As I have mentioned, these changes, as of now, they have not come into force. It has been announced that it is going to take place as of the 1st of September, but we do not have this decision on a public level, and there is a certain resolution of the government which has to enter into force. Of course, if there will be these changes, these amendments, new regulations, as soon as they are made public, they are published, and then we will know what is going to be checked in some categories of persons if these changes take place, and we will definitely inform the public about this innovation for people to know who can use this possibility and what are the criteria. As far as Ukrainians returning to Ukraine, we have also registered that uh, some people are returning from Russia and from Belarus. So, how many people returned to Ukraine from these countries? We have previously mentioned that we're always happy for Ukrainian citizens who were forced to flee and go to Russia or to the Republic of Belarus. And yes, if to talk about some border crossing points, our citizens who have the possibility to leave these countries, they are coming back. And well, these border crossing points um, are actually closed. When we talk about the decision on the governmental level, but it is still possible to cross the border and to enter the country. So are there any other changes that we could envision as far as border crossing is concerned? Maybe there will be some facilitation of the border crossing process, or maybe some restrictions are going to be imposed. Well, this is the decision of the government, its resolution, and as soon as these changes are introduced and enter into force, of course, that we can talk about some separate categories of citizens, uh, about men age 18 under 60. These are different categories who have been defined in terms of business trips, sailors, and some others. But once again, everything is going to take place when we have the decision of the government, the official decision, because this issue is under the government's consideration. There is a proposal, but it's only when it comes into effect the state border guard service could actually comment upon this decision. Do we observe lines at border crossing points? Then what are the directions and what does it imply? Well, border crossing points, they operate in western sides when the border with the European Union, and we also have another direction with Moldova. If we talk about trucks, yes, we still have lines there, but border guard officers, customs officers, and some other bodies from other countries, they try to make sure that this process happens in a fast manner. And we know that there is a problem with seaports. They are not functioning and the freight cannot pass through ports. But all uh, agencies, bodies who are responsible for these processes, they try their best to facilitate the process. As far as private vehicles are concerned, here we can say that we do not have very many lines. When uh, there were some changes, and I cannot really say that there are lines. Well, at some particular moments, there could be lines and accumulation of 100 of vehicles in one direction, but this could be explained by the fact that there is a number of people who are trying to cross the border at the same period of time. That is why I advise our citizens to use the materials, the resources from the Border Guard Service of Ukraine. Every 3 hours, we update the information to our website, and you can know more about the situation on the borders with the EU countries. And there you can see the information about the situation with lines. But I would like to pinpoint that there is no critical situation in terms of the numbers of vehicles waiting at the border crossing points. Thank you for this conversation. We had with us Andrii Demchenko, spokesperson for the State Border Guard Service of Ukraine. And at 12 o'clock, we will have another briefing. We will talk with the representative of our traveling surroundings.